So my name is Philip Osano. I'm the Center Director for the Stockholm Environment Institute, Africa Center based in Nairobi, and which is the institution that has been providing technical support towards the preparation of the African Integrated Assessment for Air Pollution and Climate Change. On behalf of the lead institution, the African Union Commission, the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, and the United Nations Environment Programme Regional Office for Africa, I have the pleasure to welcome you to join us today on this side event, linking the Paris Agreement to Africa Agenda 2063, launching the Integrated Assessment of Air Pollution and Climate Change for Sustainable Development in Africa. We have lined up for you several speakers and experts from across the depth and breadth of Africa, from also science, policy, and practice. And we would like, of course, also that you also get involved in the process. So without wasting much time, I would like to request Martina Otto, the head of the Secretariat of the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, to start with the opening remarks. Martina, welcome.
Thanks so much. Thank you. Hello, Excellencies, respected delegates, dear colleagues. First, I would like to extend my appreciation to the African Union Commission for affording us the opportunity to present this new integrated assessment on air pollution and climate change for sustainable development in Africa here today. Thank you for having us. In the production of this report, and that is, well, the UNEP convened Climate and Clean Air Coalition, the UNEP Regional Office for Africa, we have joined forces with the African Union Commission, and beyond this institutional setup, we also worked with African scientists in a process accompanied by the Stockholm Environment Institute. I would therefore like to extend my sincere appreciation to the assessment co-chairs. We're very lucky to have one with us today. The authors, the modelers, the reviewers, and everybody who has worked tirelessly on the assessment to bring it to you today. And in good CCAC spirit, this process demonstrated as well in the production of this report that there is the power of partnership, of us coming together. Now in the CCAC, we're working at the nexus of climate and clean air, and that is for 5 compelling reasons. The first is because air pollutants and greenhouse gases often share the same sources and drivers, including a fossil fuel-driven economic growth. The second is because short-lived climate pollutants, and that is black carbon, methane, HFCs, the hydrofluorocarbons, and tropospheric ozone, directly contribute to climate change and air pollution impacts simultaneously and in a mutually reinforcing manner. So the deadly duo needs to be addressed together. And because they have, and that's my third point, they have in common as well that they have a higher global warming potential than CO2 and a much shorter lifetime in the atmosphere. And that's why cutting these short-lived climate pollutants is our best shot at keeping us below 1.5 degree increase in warming. My fourth reason is because there is an array of proven and cost-effective measures that we can draw on to get the job done. And the fifth is because there are multiple benefits that these measures that we propose generate and thereby make them part and parcel of a sustainable development priority, agenda, and the strategies. So ladies and gentlemen, having said that, currently an estimated 1 million people per year die prematurely from air pollution in Africa. And to state the obvious, Africa is also particularly vulnerable to climate change. And that makes this assessment even more pertinent. It's the ever first integrated assessment of air pollution and climate change for the continent. It provides a robust scientific basis for action towards clean air in Africa. And in its development process and the findings have spurred the development of a continent-wide clean air program to take action fast. So it's not only science, but we already look at how we can drive the action. The assessment also demonstrates that a sustainable path forward, one that aims to meet the Agenda 2063, and Philip already mentioned that, the Africa we want, and the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, is possible. And that against the context of growth in economic activity, urbanization, and population that is projected on the continent. So it can be really our compass to a more sustainable future. The good news is that all the 37 measures that have been identified as part of the recommendations can be found already in at least one African nationally determined contribution, and they have also been implemented already in several countries on the continent. And that means that African leaders can act quickly and confidently across 5 key sectors. And just to name them: transport, residential energy, energy, the fossil fuel side, agriculture, and waste. And let me highlight here the importance of the waste sector in light of the Egyptian presidency's launch of the 50 by 2050, which is taking place in a different place as we speak. While taking a more holistic approach, measures such as phasing out open burning of waste, avoiding and managing organic waste to reduce methane emissions are an area of synergy with that other effort, and we really look forward to cooperation. Allow me a last word on methane, as we have a stock-taking event of the first anniversary of the Global Methane Pledge starting shortly here at COP27 as well, so today is an amazing day. And methane emission reductions are critical, especially as methane is also a precursor of tropospheric ozone that impacts human health directly and impacts crop yields, and thereby implicitly also impacts food security. Now, the implementation of the assessment's measures would enable many of the African countries who have endorsed the Global Methane Pledge to actually make good on it. So let me state as well that the assessment recognizes that drastic methane cuts by countries outside of Africa is essential to limit warming to 1.5. Don't feel the burden is only on you, but grab the opportunity for sustainable development that this area provides. And it's also because this action, including outside, would help Africa avoid some of the worst impacts of climate change and reduce cost of adaptation. And now we look forward to hearing from our distinguished speakers, as well as, well, I'm looking definitely forward to the next steps that we can take, taking science to implementation. And for sure, the CCAC stands ready to provide capacity and institutional strengthening support as may be requested. And I hope that this network of scientists that has been created through this process will continue to provide strong scientific underpinning from within, and that we can crowd in more actors from private sector, finance, that's public and private, and the local and the central governments. And let me close thereby with the motto of this COP: together in implementation. Thank you.
Can I ask for more round of applause? The African round, the way of clapping. Thank you so much, Martin. And on behalf of the team that worked on this, we would also like to extend our appreciation to the Climate and Clean Air Coalition for both financial support, technical support, and your leadership, which has enabled us to reach this far. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, the assessment has been a process that has been led by a group of distinguished Africans. 3 of them have been serving as coordinating co-chair. Dr. Brian Matlanta, who is from the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research in South Africa. Dr. Alice Kaudia, the former Environment Secretary at the Ministry of Environment and Forestry, Kenya. And Professor Yuba Sokona, Vice Chair of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC. We are most privileged this afternoon that we have Professor Yuba Sokona with us here. I can't think of any voice on issues of climate and on issues of energy in Africa more than Professor Yuba Sokona. So, Professor, we appreciate your being able to be with us here. Please, as a coordinating co-chair of the assessment, come and share some insights about what the assessment is about and how you see this summary report that we are launching for decision makers today. What kind of change do you envisage it to bring, and what kind of support system do we need to put in place for the different institutions. So welcome, Professor.
Thank you. Thank you, Philip. Thank you. Good afternoon. I don't know what to add. What Martina has said, everything. I don't know what else needs to be added. Apart the fact that in the context of Africa, sustainable development, air pollution, and climate change are interrelated, closely interrelated. It's very difficult to separate three of them. And in that context, Africa really needs its own narrative on those very important issues. This will require navigating, frequently between knowledge, research, policy, and practice. It is through that lens the assessment have taken place, and it covers 5 critical areas. Energy. This is a given, and there's no need to go to details why this is fundamental, it's crucial in the context of Africa. Residential. I thought that, some of us thought that since Nairobi conference in 1981, can you imagine, 1981, we were dreaming that to get rid of firewood and charcoal in Africa. We are in 2022. It has a devastating consequence in the continent. And then transport. This is chaotic, inefficient, and polluting in many parts of Africa. Agriculture, there is no need to go to any details. And one of the nightmares of all African big cities, this is waste. How to deal with that. And those are some of the critical elements the assessment look at, because all those issues has been intensively debated. And then to look at the various elements, as I indicated, on knowledge, science, policy, and practice. An effort to identify how to improve the situation in Africa in the context of climate change over the last 30 years. But to date, we are still experiencing familiar problems, because those are not new problems, new issues. I just take the case of firewood, and I can take any of them. None of them are new issues, despite the fact that we have knowledge, despite the fact that the technology have improved, but the situation remains the same. And continued reliance on fossil fuel, cooking on wood fuel and charcoal, polluting transport system, and sustainable agricultural practice, and a huge waste problems. This integrated assessment shows that what could be achieved if all these sectors are sufficiently and effectively financed with a strong policy based on the practice, on scientific evidence, and work together in an integrated way. This will provide benefits not just for the climate, but for human health and crop yield while development is taking place. The measures identified are not new, and real change could be made. But to achieve this, we need a transition and to think strategically for the different sectors. For example, moving the population up in the energy ladder. Many say transition, I will say jump starting. So it's possible, and then to jump start in different rural areas to move from charcoal and firewood cooking and then to electric cooking. Technology is there, it's possible. The science is there, it's possible. And then we need the policy, we need the finance, we need some of the different elements. Or to look at different mobility systems in the urban area. It's easy, I think Martina can decide to walk in Paris and then to take a bicycle to do the office. I cannot do that in Bamako, and I cannot do that in Dakar, I cannot do that in Nairobi. Why? We are in an early stage of building our infrastructure, particularly the transport system. and the urbanization system. Why we cannot jumpstart those perspectives. And then this assessment is only a beginning of the start of a long journey, and very important start of that long journey. And then now we need to come together and then to make the change, and for this partnership will be key, and especially with industry, financing or innovators. And then we need permanently, as I indicated, to navigate between the policy, the practice, and the science. Unless we bring those two together, we will not be able to make any progress. Thank you for your attention.
Again, let's do it better. Thank you, Yuban. Thank you so much for your leadership. I think my colleagues and I have really enjoyed working with you, not just because of the expertise that you brought, but also the personal mentorship. Professor Yuba is a very busy person, but even if you call him at night, you'll be sure that you'll get a response immediately. So thank you so much. We appreciate that. Ladies and gentlemen, as we talk about air pollution and climate, we know that one of the groups that are most affected are women. In Africa, we talked about doing clean cooking in many of the rural areas, and even in informal parts of urban cities in most African countries. Women are exposed daily to poor air quality, which is affecting their health and affecting mostly also the children. We are privileged today because the First Lady of the Republic of Kenya, Her Excellency, Madam Rachel Ruto, has been very passionate about ensuring the need to address issues of air pollution affecting women. She's championed over the last several years various programs that are addressing short-lived climate pollutants, and she was very excited when she heard about this report, and she has lent her support to it. And unfortunately, she couldn't be here in person, but through the Executive Office of the Presidency of the Republic of Kenya, we do have a representative, Arnold Tuey, who will be available to read the statement from Her Excellency Rachel Ruto. So Arnold, please welcome.
Thank you, Philip. My name is Arnold Kipchumba, and I work in the Office of the First Lady of the Republic of Kenya. Her Excellency would have loved to be here, but unfortunately, she was not able due to unavoidable circumstances. Her Excellency has adopted 3 strategic pillars in her term in this office, and one is women economic empowerment, and this is work that she's been doing for the past 14 years. And then she's also adopted another strategic pillar, which is faith diplomacy, and recently environment and climate action. Under environment and climate action, Her Excellency has been really passionate about reducing short-lived climate pollutants. So I'll just proceed and read the statement on her behalf. African Union Commission representative present, ministers, Africa Development Bank, Climate and Clean Air Coalition, Stockholm Environment Institute, led by Dr. Osano, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I am honored to be your esteemed guest at this high-level event to mark the launch of the Summary for Decision Makers report of the Integrated Assessment of Air Pollution and Climate Change for Sustainable Development in Africa. I am personally very passionate about tackling climate change and air pollution in Africa because I recognize that air, especially from households using polluting fuels, transport, open burning of waste, affect the most vulnerable of our populations, especially women and children. For this reason, I have offered patronage to the Kenya Short-Lived Climate Pollutants Project with close partnership with Climate Works Foundation to promote the reduction of short-lived climate pollutants and strengthening the role of civil societies and subnational entities in reducing short-lived climate pollutants. According to the latest report of the World Health Organization, nearly 1 in 10 persons breathe polluted air. In other words, air pollution has become a silent killer, causing over 1 million deaths in Africa, affecting mostly women and children that are exposed to harmful pollutants both indoors and outdoors. In my country, Kenya, for example, the use of traditional and inefficient cooking stoves contributes to approximately 23,000 respiratory related deaths annually and other chronic illnesses. The combination of air pollution and climate change is creating a huge risk for Africa's development. According to the 6th assessment report of the IPCC, despite having the lowest per capita greenhouse gas emissions of all the world's region, Africa remains amongst the world's most vulnerable regions to climate change. Thus, the continent faces a double burden of a worsening air quality and climate vulnerability. As we speak today, Kenya faces one of the worst droughts that has left 4.3 million people severely affected, most of whom are women and children who suffer from food, cooking energy, and water insecurity, as well as loss of livelihoods. But Kenya is not unique. Climate events have been recorded around the globe with devastating impact on humanity and the ecosystems, natural resources, and physical infrastructure upon which they depend. I wish to congratulate the African Union for providing the political leadership in preparation of the integrated assessment of air pollution and climate change for sustainable development in Africa, while with partnership with UNEP, Regional Office for Africa, and the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, CCAC. I equally laud the hundreds of scientific authors who gave their knowledge generously to produce scientific evidence, and the Stockholm Environment Institute, which provided technical support and coordinated the assessment. Ladies and gentlemen, the report points to the fact that Africa has a huge opportunity to continue developing sustainably, improve human well-being, and protect nature by investing in solutions to fight climate change and air pollution together. It also highlights opportunities such as improvements in clean cooking technologies and sustainable waste management, among others. In Kenya, we have recognized this linkage, and through the Ministry of Environment and Forestry, are in the process of developing a national action plan on short-lived climate pollutants. The NAP will provide a roadmap for implementation of the 37 measures identified in the integrated assessment across the 5 key areas identified, namely transport, residential energy, agriculture, and waste, to fight climate change, prevent air pollution, and protect human health and well-being. COP27 has been dubbed the implementation COP. I therefore wish to encourage other African countries to act quickly to implement the measures recommended in the report, in collaboration with the regional economic communities, development partners, and non-state actors to achieve our desired goal. It is critical to invest in finances, technology, policies, and regulations. Ladies and gentlemen, we must leave no one behind, more so the millions of women and girls around the world who breathe in harmful smoke as they cook and spend hours walking long distances to secure cooking fuel. This is not only a matter of equity, justice, and dignity, but a necessity for all of us. Really, it's a human right issue. There is no doubt that we need a just and inclusive energy transition that will strengthen people's capabilities, well-being, health, boost their level of resilience, spur innovation toward a sustainable society at all scales, and encourage significant financial investments. I wish to congratulate all of those who have been working to make the clean cooking transition possible. Your effort has seen the deployment of technology, knowledge, and finance to millions across the globe. While gains have been made, there are still more lives yet to be touched. I therefore call all to invest in the economic empowerment of women to realize women's rights and gender equality. With crisis comes opportunity, and climate change is a crisis, but we must see the opportunity to build better. And this is why I want to express my commitment to clean cooking, methane emissions reductions through promotion of household and communal biogas development and good manure management for increased food productivity, and to ensure that no one is left behind and that our homes and places of work are safe for all of us. This is a critical time for Africa, a defining moment in our drive to build climate resilience and a sustainable future. We must therefore be optimistic and unapologetic in advancing the need to scale up financing for adaptation and management of air pollution. Each of us has a right to breathe clean air. Let us take action to tackle air pollution and climate change as one problem. Thank you so much for your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Arnold. And please also express our gratitude to the First Lady of Kenya, Her Excellency, Madam Rachel Chebet Ruto. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the things that makes me excited about working on this report over the last 3 years has been the high level and quality of the authors who have been involved in it, but also the scientific rigor. Most of you who are in science like me would know that Africa is actually, I call it a graveyard of parachute science. Everybody talks about not having data. People come in for 2-3 months and publish papers and say that, Africa has a problem. But for the last 2.5 years, we've had a team of dedicated scientists, over 100 of them, working day and night under difficult circumstances, even during COVID, to make sure that this assessment was done using the best available scientific tools and modeling work. Coordinating that team has been a core group that has been meeting since 2019 every week for 2 hours every Wednesday to make sure that this process is running. The group has been with colleagues from Stockholm Environment Institute, UNEP Region Office for Africa, and CCAC, and African Union Commission. And so we are finally able to present to you the findings from this report, and that will fall on my colleague, Dr. Andriana Mbadi, who is an air quality expert at the United Nations Environment Program. So Dr. Andriana, please welcome to the stage so that you can actually really share the findings of this assessment and really build the confidence that this is actually not your ordinary parachute science that we see every day. Welcome to the stage.
Thank you very much. I think Philip has set up the excitement for this already. And I guess I've been given a clicker. So as much as I'm a scientist, let's see how science works in action, if the clicker will really work. So this afternoon, I'm delighted, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, to present to you the initial findings from the African assessment. The presentation is looking to link the Paris Agreement and Agenda 2063. The presentation is titled The Integrated Assessment for Air Pollution and Climate Change for Sustainable Development for Africa. This is the launch of the report for the summary for decision makers. So I'll begin by giving you the assessment objectives. The assessment, as you've heard, is a combination of several years of work and hundreds of scientists. So they're all in different spheres, including modeling, they're policymakers, they're scientists, they're engineers. So I really hope that I can do a good job of presenting these initial results. So the assessment is looking at the African Union Agenda 2063, which is, the vision is the Africa we want. The assessment examines challenges, implications, and trade-offs of a range of alternatives, development pathways that may be plausibly taken to achieve goals in Agenda 2063. Specifically, we examine how this agenda can proceed at the same time, ensuring reduction of air pollution, improving human health, limiting impacts on local ecosystems, and avoiding climate change impacts. But we also look at how we can ensure that we have timely responses for planning for governments and all key stakeholders. We also explore using modeling various options for enhanced synergies and avoided trade-offs. So what I want to give you is why we have this political mandate, how we got this political mandate. So I'm presenting to you what African ministers for the environment have actually agreed and issued a resolution. In 2019, we had the African Ministerial Conference for the Environment decision to undertake the assessment of air pollution, short-lived climate pollutants, to ensure action for clean air and avoid climate change impacts. That's back in 2019 in Durban. Then in 2022, we actually have another resolution following the assessment completion, which is Decision 38, and I'll just read what the decision says. The decision says, we note the completion of the integrated assessment of air pollution and climate change for sustainable development in Africa, and its report in response to the AMSEN Decision 17.2, which is the one for 2019. We urge African countries to support further development and implementation of 37 recommended measures as a continent-wide Africa Clean Air Program. We urge for coordinated and strong-led country initiatives cascaded to regional economic communities and higher policy regions. So I actually am happy to note in the room that I see ECOWAS and I see SADC as well in attendance among some of the regional economic communities that we've been working with. So the assessment actually looks at 5 key areas where African governments can act to protect human health and the environment. And these 5 key areas, I'll just repeat again. This is energy, residential, agriculture, transport, and waste. When you talk about energy, we are looking at renewable energies, phasing out hydrofluorocarbons, energy efficiency, capturing methane. When you talk about residential, we are looking at clean cooking, heating, and lighting. Agriculture, we are looking at reduction of food waste, ensuring we capture and we reduce methane emissions, efficient livestock management practices and manure practices, and elimination of crop burning. When you look at transport, we are looking at better public transport. Anybody who is from Africa or been in Africa, you know we have a very much a fondness of using minibuses, motorcycles, tuk-tuks, so that 2-wheelers, 3-wheelers, and minibuses for public transportation. So you're looking at how we can improve that kind of transportation, which ferries millions and millions of Africans. And then we're looking at electric vehicles and motorcycles, crucially 2-wheelers and 3-wheelers, cleaner vehicles, and of course, walking and cycling, given that more than half of us actually walk and cycle at some point of our journey. Last but not least, waste. We are looking at improved waste management systems, reduction of open waste burning, composting, and reduction of organic waste. Now, in this assessment, all emissions are considered. When I say that, I mean that we are looking at air pollutants, greenhouse gases, short-lived climate pollutants. If you look at the chart in front of you, for those who can see it, or the one behind you, depending on where you're seated, you will see that there's 11 pollutants. Now, of those are, as we have said, we are looking at 5 areas and 37 measures. Now, in that, we have a baseline scenario, or what we call the business as usual, and then we have the short-lived climate pollutants scenario and Agenda 2063 scenario. So, if we look at those, and you look at that chart from back 2018 to 2063, we have chosen to look at the milestones at 2030 and 2063 as a good way to summarize what's happening in Africa. So if you look at that chart again, it shows percentage reductions versus the baseline. The gray and yellow in that chart shows you Agenda 2063, both in 2030 and 2063. Blue and orange is the short-lived climate pollutant scenario, 2030 and 2063. Now, if you look at that chart, what you're seeing is this percentage reduction up to nearly 100% in some instances, if all measures are implemented for some pollutants, critically the hydrofluorocarbons, for carbon monoxide, for NOxes, and black carbon. Also to note, and given the momentum created at Glasgow and going forward where we look at methane reduction, I'm happy to tell you that over 70% of methane can be reduced in the 2063 agenda scenario when you look at the year 2063 particularly. So in this slide, I want you to start linking about impacts, because it's not enough to say that we have modeled, we have seen the concentrations, we have seen how those are changing over the years. What really gets to you and what gets to me is when I understand how it impacts my health, how it impacts my pocket, how it impacts not just me, but the future generations going forward. So this slide is showing you the impact of air pollution on health at first, and also the impact of air pollution on precipitation. So let's start first with the impact on health. If you look at the baseline, again, if we just go without interventions, business as usual, we are looking in Africa by 2030 to have 930,000 premature deaths. If we look forward to 2063, I'm afraid we are looking at 1.6 million premature deaths, and this is per year by the year 2063. Now, the good news, if we look at the Agenda 2063 scenario, we are looking at implementing 24 energy measures and 13 non-energy measures. Of those measures, we'll see a reduction of premature deaths. We'll reduce that to 180,000 premature deaths per year, that is looking at outdoor air pollution, by the year 2030, and 800,000 premature deaths per year by the year 2063. Now, if you're implementing Agenda 2063, in fact, there's also benefits where we look at indoor air pollution. For those who are in this space, you know that we often look at indoor air pollution and outdoor air pollution, and we do those estimations differently. But in this assessment, we have been able to also quantify what are the benefits of indoor air pollution and reduction in premature mortality. In this case, 20,000 deaths are avoided from indoor air pollution in 2030. That goes up to about 80,000 deaths avoided from indoor air pollution by the year 2063. Now, in terms of precipitation, African climate is largely governed by global emissions. But if we are looking at all the measures, and all these measures are implemented, in some areas in Africa, we will see changes in rainfall, in precipitation. So there's a change in local precipitation patterns. Now, specifically, if you look at the Sahel region, in months of June to August, you'll see a change in precipitation there, and then Southeast Africa from January to March. So different parts of Africa, different parts of the year, there is change of precipitation, either reduction or more precipitation. These changes are actually caused by air pollution, specifically looking at aerosols and greenhouse gases. Now, I would like to give you a little bit more detail where we look at the analysis of fine particulate matter, specifically PM2.5. I know that aerosol scientists like to sing about PM2.5, and often people think, what is this PM2.5? So PM2.5 are very fine particles that in terms of micrometers, they are so tiny you cannot see them in your naked eye. But when you breathe them in, from the brain all the way to your toes will be impacted by bringing those fine particulate particles. So this is the premature deaths in regions, looking at North Africa, West Africa, Central Africa, Southern Africa, and Eastern Africa. Now, if you look at that, we have both fine particulate matter as well as ozone. Now, in the baseline scenario, there's increase of deaths. In each case, you see that it's more than doubling in nearly every region. Now, if you look at the implementation of short-lived climate pollutant scenarios, shows reductions of deaths in all regions. It's mostly showing a curve that is reducing or flattening when these are implemented. Then Agenda 2063 also shows a flattening of the curve in all regions and reductions, notably, especially West Africa, which is already showing a signal that is higher than other regions. Now, similar trends are also observed for ozone, when it's related to premature mortality. Now, how likely are we to attain clean air, reaching WHO air quality guidelines, which are 5 microgram per meter cubed annually for PM2.5, for the fine particulate matter, or the interim target 1, for example, which is 35 micrograms per meter cubed. Now, if we look at the business as usual, it takes us far away from reaching these guidelines or targets. However, if we implement any of these scenarios, either Agenda 2063 scenario or the short-lived climate pollutant scenario, you see there are similar gains across all regions. Now, all regions benefit from reductions in premature mortality under both scenarios. So that is the good news. Now, I'd like to also touch a little bit on residential clean cooking. And there's a reason, because in Africa, we all know that what we use for lighting, cooking, and heating is the use of biomass. This is very prevalent. And a lot of people then think the use of biomass is just in rural areas. But actually, use of biomass is both urban and rural households. Now, of course, it is more prevalent in rural households. And if you look at those charts, the one at the very top, the one with the very nice colors and stacked, you can start to see that there's different uses of different fuels. And as you move forward, going towards 2063, what you're looking is reduction of the use of biomass. Now, in doing so, and also given that all those are different energies in use in households, we were looking at, in 2018, 250,000 deaths a year. So more than a third of these deaths will be children. And I think that should sadden us massively and spur us to take action. In the short-lived climate pollutant and 2063 scenario, we show a significant drop in the number of deaths for both of these scenarios. So this is to take note and to understand all populations are impacted, but as we had, our more vulnerable members of our communities and societies are more heavily impacted. Now, agriculture is the bedrock of African economy. And this is consideration. It should also further alarm us, given the status of food security, that air pollution could actually worsen this. Now, if you look at this, you look at the impact on crop yield. Specifically, we looked at 4 crops: maize, rice, soya, and wheat. Now, implementing, and this is the good news, implementing the 37 measures will lead to yield gains for these crops in Africa. From rice, about 1%, maize, 4%, soy, 6%, and wheat, 11%, particularly in East Africa. This translates, of course, to thousands kilotons of food we badly need as the continent faces ravages of droughts and floods, and as the continent also feels the bite of the war in Ukraine. And so this slide shows you the different regions. How does a crop yield vary across the different regions in Africa for the different crops? Now, again, implementing the 37 measures will lead to highest yield gains, both all of it in North, East, West, and Central Africa. Now, then moving on to the 37 measures and looking at the 5 regions again, and looking at also the 5 different areas: energy, residential, agriculture, and transport. We also want to start showcasing a sector that has become very important, has gained momentum at COP27. This is the waste sector. So in Africa, Africa has taken unprecedented leadership in plastic, open waste banning, and sustainable waste management. In 2022, in September, at the AMSEN conference, the African Ministerial Conference for Environment, there was an omnibus decision on waste. So the first one was to tackle plastic waste, which follows, it's in line with the UNEP resolution back earlier in the year. Then there's elimination of open waste banning. And in this, we have a launch of the multi-stakeholder partnership on the 15th of November, just a few days ago. And then African ministers also urged us to support the 50% waste treatment initiative in Africa by the year 2050. And let us not forget that in taking these actions, we need to take a holistic approach that not only looks at solid waste, but also liquid waste, which presents options for methane capture. We can look at incorporating practices that ensure all key stakeholders, including the informal sector in Africa, that provides a very key service of waste management, but also looking at diversion and use of food waste in ensuring better food security, and improved sanitation, which critically, of course, touches on water, soil, air, pollution. So I like going all the way down to these key points so that you can all take a look at them. So these are the main messages from the assessment. What does the assessment show us? It shows us, at first, that air pollution and climate change are very closely linked. So the integrated package of measures, they achieve very important synergies and trade-offs. Now, oh, it moved. I knew that it was too good to be true. Yeah? Okay. So second one, by investing in solutions to fight climate change and air pollution, Africa has the opportunity of building on progress achieving multiple SDGs. Now the third one, if these measures are widely implemented across Africa, there will be benefits in environment, in socio-economic, there will be socio-economic benefits across all genders, age, income groups. Now, if we look at relating this to crop yield to health, we're also looking at critically and speaking the same language of climate mitigation, adaptation, and resilience. The fourth one, most recommended measures, and this is the good news, most recommended measures have already been successfully implemented in different parts of Africa. The fifth one, projected growth across Africa can be achieved whilst maintaining current levels of emissions or even reducing the emissions. The last one, we in Africa will be the beneficiaries that will be the ones benefiting what comes from implementing these 37 measures. So let us look to work together to combat air pollution and to combat climate change. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Andriana, for that wonderful presentation. Can we give another round of applause, please? I'm always fighting against time, so I'm trying to rush here, but the central anchor of this process has been national governments in Africa and regional economic communities. We've had focal points in all the 6 RECs, and we're pleased today we have, I think I saw Bernard Kofi from ECOWAS here. Bernard is here. I understand Sibongile is here. Do you have anybody else from the RECs? ESC, ECAS? None. We've also had in about 37 countries, member states nominated national focal points from the respective ministries responsible for environment, who've actually been the direct link to make sure that as we do the assessment, it's feedback directly to the needs and requirements of national government. And today we are privileged to have 2 of them who've actually been real champions and leaders for this process. And I'd like to request them to come here in front of the stage. Dr. Thuli Kumalo, currently the Chief Operations Officer, Presidential Climate Commission, South Africa. Previously the national focal point for South Africa, and Dr. Pacifica Ogola, Director, Climate Change Directorate, Minister of Environment and Forestry. Please join me on stage. Thuli, I mean, we don't have time, but you know, this process can only move forward if member states, you know, own this kind of recommendations and champion directly, but also indirectly, working with the private sector and other actors, some of the implementation of these measures. What has it been like for you, and how do we take this forward in South Africa? If you can just share your insights in 2 minutes.
Thank you, Philip. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me say all protocol observed. I know that covers everyone. But thank you very much for including South Africa in this assessment. We have major air pollution problems, and we have huge strides to make to resolve our energy issues. We've always said and found in South Africa that as long as the energy policy, the transport policy, don't change in the Republic, there will not be any improvements in air quality. I think many people will know about South Africa's just energy transition investment, the 8.5 billion, and the fact that South Africa has now tabled an investment plan on how we intend to utilize that money. But for me, as a scientist, let me say, one of the things that I like about this assessment is it provides data for Africa by Africa. And the whole story that there is no information in Africa and we cannot make recommendations, we cannot do anything, it ends right here. And that's very important, even for the academia, to have a report that covers the African issues in general. And implementation of the measures, I think for me, it's not in question. If you want to resolve the problem, here are the problems that have been, you know, experts have worked and come up with, you know, proper explanation and how we then have to deal with that. And for South Africa in particular, implementation is always tricky. We do get very wonderful reports and policies and all of that, but struggle when it comes to implementation. We also have unprecedented population growth. I don't know whether maybe we can't project well our population growth, but this report is key. This assessment is key, and implementing these measures mean that we and our sister countries can take our region forward in this area of sustainable development, equality, and climate change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julie. I mean, it's been, of course, I know South Africa's challenge is a bit unique, but I guess it's very interesting to see how you'd like to take this forward. Dr. Pacifica, they say every good story comes from Kenya. So I know Kenya is in the process of finalizing the National Action Plan for short-lived climate pollutants. How useful has this process been for you, and how do you see the country taking it forward?
Yeah, thank you very much, Philip, for inviting me. I also want to thank UNEP, African Union Commission, and Climate and Clean Air Coalition for this opportunity to speak here this afternoon. Yes, Kenya has always been on the front line, and I think we are leading even in terms of policy. We are leading in terms of implementing our NDC, and we now have a draft long-term strategy. And all these are aligned with the draft SNAP report that was developed with the support of Climate and Clean Air Coalition through the Stockholm Environment Institute. And I have to congratulate you for this report, and I think Kenyans led the process. I say this with a lot of humility. And the 38 measures which were adopted at AMSEN are also aligned with our NDC targets, and are also aligned with the milestone that we have put in the SNAP. So there is a straight linkage between the SNAP report, the NDC, and the long-term strategy, the draft long-term strategy for 2050. So as a country, our commitment is to do our part in terms of implementation. And we had requested that this also be anchored within the African Union Commission, because it's an African report and it needs a home. So I don't know if that is still the projection as a program where we report on an annual basis on the progress of implementation. It's one thing to say we will implement it, but we need to monitor, because this is like a baseline report. So in the next 5 or so years, we'll be able to come back and say, these were the findings, and then we do another assessment and say, this is where we are. And I'm happy that I can see in the audience my colleagues from the Ministry of Health and Ministry of Transport, because they are very critical in this process. We'll work with you, continue to work with you, and in Kenya, I cannot unpack all the measures that we are taking, but the government is very committed to attaining clean energy access, by clean cooking access by 2028, 100% clean energy by 2030, and of course we are also moving very fast towards e-mobility, while very conscious about e-waste that will result from that process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I know you haven't had the chance to talk about the energy revolution, renewable energy and so on, and the sports and climate and air quality, which is some of the innovations Kenya has been leading on. So, ladies and gentlemen, at this stage, I would like to invite Dr. Kwame Ababio from the NEPAD AUJA, representing the Commissioner, Ambassador Josepha Sako, Commissioner for Agriculture, Rural Development, Blue Economy and Sustainable Environment, to get the speech of the Commission and to preside over the launch. And as you come, Kwame, let me ask Sibogile, please just join them. You are not speaking, but I would like you to be part of the launch. Kofi has gone. And Lawrence, please, could you bring the report? So, Kwame.
Thank you very much, Philip, and good afternoon to everyone. I'm here representing Her Excellency Commissioner Josepha Sako, who has had to leave the COP to attend to other equally pressing matters back in Addis. So I proceed to read the statement of Commissioner Sacco. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the African Union Commission, it is my honor and pleasure to welcome all of you to this side event organized by the African Union to launch the summary for decision makers of the Integrated Assessment of Air Pollution and Climate Change for Sustainable Development in Africa, and to present to stakeholders the key messages and recommendations on addressing air pollution and climate change challenges in Africa. I am very pleased that you are all able to join us today on this very important occasion. I wish in particular to acknowledge and appreciate our partnership with the United Nations Environment Programme's Regional Office for Africa, the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, and the Stockholm Environment Institute in the execution of the assessment that is being presented to you today. I also wish to extend my sincere appreciation and that of the African Union to the coordinating co-chairs and the over 100 authors, modelers, and the reviewers from Africa and internationally, the focal points from the Ministries of Environment, the International Advisory Group, and everyone who has worked tirelessly on this assessment. Special thanks go to Hassan Nyambe and Charles Sebukira of UNEP for ably co-chairing the advisory group. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, this work on the assessment has taken over 2 years and has been achieved successfully despite the limitations brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. This assessment was anchored on AMCEN Decision 17/2 of 2019, which was held in Durban, South Africa. The decision emphasized the benefits of improving air quality, including through managing and, as nationally appropriate, reducing short-lived climate pollutants in the environment, agriculture, health, and forest conservation, while responding to the aspirations of Africa's Agenda 2063 and the Sustainable Development Goals. The summary of the findings was also presented at the 18th session of the AMCEN in Dakar in September of this year. And I wish to express my sincere appreciation to His Excellency, the Minister of Environment for Senegal, who also acts as the President of AMCEN, for the leadership and support for this assessment. Ladies and gentlemen, I call upon all of us to reflect on the solutions presented in the report and what each one of us can do to ensure that we set the continent on a cleaner development pathway towards realization of the key development priorities of Agenda 2063, the Africa we want, as well as the objectives of the African Union Climate Change and Resilient Development Strategy. The African Union looks forward to work with member states, the regional economic communities, civil society, and all key stakeholders in the implementation of actions across the 5 key areas and the 37 measures that have been identified in this assessment. More specifically, the African Union Commission will take lead in mobilization of resources to ensure the development of a continental clean air program to, among others, strengthen data on air quality and work with member states to strengthen their national air quality management programs and explore the establishment of a convention of transboundary air quality management in Africa that builds upon the existing regional framework agreements on air pollution led by the regional economic communities. This will be critical in the realization of Agenda 2063. I therefore thank all of you for your attention, and I look forward to successful implementation of the assessment recommendations. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kwame. And on behalf of the Commission, I would request you to launch the report. I would like to request Christina Romanelli from World Health Organization to join, and Arnold, please join the stage. Lawrence, can you please distribute the report? So I guess you all just stand and we take a great photo and say the report, Kwame will say the report is launched. So ladies and gentlemen, I think we present to you the report, the African Assessment for Air Pollution and Climate Change, and to thank all the colleagues who have been here to see this journey up to this stage, but also to mark the next stage. We are short of time, but I would like to ask my colleague Kevin, who's been coordinating this, just for 1 minute, Kevin, just 1 minute, because we are short of time, to just, I know you have a word of thank you and one or two things to say. Please come over.
Good afternoon, everyone. Just before you all leave, I'd like to thank you very much for attending this fantastic event, and thank you to everyone who came. And we really appreciate it. And we've been working on this for 3 years. We've made a lot of friends in Africa. We have over just about 100 authors. We have 50 international advisors and reviewers altogether. So there's been a lot of people involved, and we'd like to thank you all today, especially our co-chairs who have been devoted, patient and inspirational, I'd like to say. And of course, you know, the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, UNEP and the SCI that have really supported this process very strongly. And you know, this is just a first step, and I look forward to joining you on the journey as we go into the future and clean the air in Africa. Yes! Thank you very much. You are all ambassadors, so please spread the message, and together we can clean up. Thank you.
Okay.